Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the WVU Mountaineer Pregame Show, joined by Frank Fuller as always, and our special guest today, Mr. Tanner Russell, former WVU great. And guys, I think we got a hefty challenge coming up today at noon at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati. I think it's going to be a hard-fought game, and if we can come out with a victory on this, it's going to be a real positive.
Yeah, I agree. It's, all the games are important, but this one is especially important. As we said on Wednesday, Cincinnati doesn't always get the credit it deserves. It's a good team. They've got a tremendous offense, a very strong offensive line, a veteran line. They can rush, they can pass, got good receivers, good defense, strong linebackers. West Virginia's going to have to play its best game, but we've been playing well on the road. But Tanner, your thoughts about today's game?
I would agree. It looks like to me Cincinnati's a pretty strong team. When you look at the schedule and some of the losses they've had, again, all one good teams, and in addition to that, pretty close games. There's no game on their schedule that they show as a loss where they actually let the score get out of hand. They are heavy to I would say the senior class here, so they've got a lot of veteran players. I would, again, anymore when you say that about any team, you kind of have to peel back the layers to see how many of those players, if they're a redshirt senior or a senior, are they a redshirt senior because they've been in school for 5 years, or have they been at Cincinnati for 5 years?
Yeah.
That's always the kind of telltale at this point with college football, but. To your point, they are a veteran-heavy team. There's, regardless of where you've played, if you have 4 to 5 years in college football, you've got the experience. So that's going to be a pretty good matchup today.
Yeah, that was one of the things that worried me. Of course, we do our keys game, and that their offensive line is a veteran offensive line, and they like to throw the ball all over. And that worries me because we have such a hard time defending the pass, and without getting pressure on the quarterback, it makes it even more difficult to pass. And that offensive line is set up not to let that happen. So it's going to be a challenge, no question about it. And you just hope our defensive line can turn it up a notch or two and put some pressure on the quarterback and make it a little easier on our defensive back. I think I read where we were a 4.5 or 5 point underdog, I believe, going in. And most of the commentary I read about most of them were saying that West Virginia's problem is going to be that they get screwed up in the air, and Cincinnati is air oriented. They have a good running attack, but they like to throw the ball, and most of them felt like that was going to be problematic for us, unless one of the weaknesses of Cincinnati's team, very very minimal weakness, is their defensive line and run stopping. They give up quite a few yards on the ground, and I think it's imperative that we run the ball, control the ball. Time of possession is going to be important, and hopefully we can keep them off the field.
No, that
for the snot and the sniffing. I got a bad
got
cold.
The sniffles.
Yeah.
And you make some very good points there, and again, when you look across even their defensive line, that's. Again, you see some youth there, but not that much. Again, they're juniors. I mean, so again, it kind of comes down to how long have they been playing together? Because when you look at, and I agree, one of the really just a tough spot for the Mountaineers all season has seemed to be the defensive secondary. And it is unfortunate because we've put ourselves in positions to where we've scored enough points to win the game, right? Or we're third and way too far to be giving up a wide open receiver to just play pitch and catch with the quarterback. And the thing is you look at our defensive, basically with our starting lineup and our depth chart. Again, when you're looking at our cornerbacks, our safeties, we've got a junior, senior, redshirt senior, and I believe they're all transfers. So again, while they've got some age to them, they've got some experience. It's not having that experience together over a couple of seasons, and that's everything. That's everything from summer camp. That's beating yourself to death in the winter with Coach Joseph and in the weight room, and then spring ball. When everybody just kind of comes together in early August. I mean, this is on the fly, and so I think that, again, while we've got some good experience and some age, we don't have that mesh that you would really want to see out of a class that's got that much experience.
Yeah.
And Tanner, I'm glad you said that, because I know Frank and I have talked numerous times about our defensive secondary, and I think we both have kind of come to the conclusion that it's not about skill or talent. It's about schematics and getting in the right place and understanding where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there. And I think they've really struggled with that, because there's too many instances where you just have a person running free down the middle of the field. And that right there is a sign of somebody blew an assignment. I don't think it's talent. I think, like you said, there are a lot of seniors back there. And but we have talked about the schematics and the plays and where they're supposed to be and when they're supposed to be, and when they're supposed to be there, when they're not supposed to be there. I just seem to really struggle with that.
And I agree. And it just and that's when you can really see it is if and I don't want to sound critical here, but sometimes it's the game plan, it's the coaching a little bit too. If they I mean, when a receiver is so wide open, typically that's going to be because somebody, either the player blew the call or we were not in the right formation. We were not in the right coverage, because there's just no reason with the speed and the athleticism of these guys nowadays that somebody should just be so wide open. And I know the defensive line, and we have a fantastic defensive line, a lot of experience there. And these are some guys that are, when you look at Sean Martin, I mean, Sean Martin's been here since he's come out of high school, and there's a lot of experience there. And I know they're doing their best to really put the pressure on the quarterback, but, they can only do so much. Our linebackers are young, so sometimes that's where I feel like we lose the experience. We end up kind of soft in the middle with the defense. But all in all, if they'll just if the effort's there, which I truly think it has been all season, minus one game in my opinion, I think that we'll be in pretty good shape. I am kind of curious to see how the entire defense, as well as the entire team today, how they respond to now with the defensive coordinator's exit. How is everybody going to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, they're going to be under pressure today because this Brendan Storesby, to your point earlier, he's a transfer, played at Indiana and then transferred to Cincinnati, is going to put pressure. I mean, the guy's thrown for over 2,000 yards. And if you look at the stats, he can run when he needs to. He scored 6 touchdowns, and 20 yards is his longest run for the year. So he's been around. He's savvy. They're playing at home, and he's got good receivers. We talked about that Wednesday night. Got really good runners. That Kiner is very good. And so, to your point earlier, or just a few seconds ago, Tanner, that defensive line and linebackers are going to be put to a test to manage control the running game. They've done a good job doing that. But what they can't afford to do is give up the big play, either a long run or a long pass. No room for error, and so I think it's fair to say that certainly when we talked about this on Wednesday, we all went with the Mountaineers, but there's a lot of nervousness that we feel about this game. And you have to win it. You got to go 5-4. You can't go 4-5. You just can't. You just can't.
Yeah. And we all picked what I always do, and we feel because I can't imagine sitting there not rooting for them, just to help my own cause. One thing was mentioned again that Tanner mentioned earlier. Again, I like this because he's mentioned a lot of things that we've talked about. Talked about the defense schemes, the coaches, that sort of thing. Yeah, I heard Neil Brown in one of his press conferences. He spoke about, and I don't have any idea what this means, but I think I know about football. I heard him start talking this. He was talking about a Tampa 2 coverage, and which I have no idea what that means, but I think it means 2 safeties. I'm not sure. But anyway, he kept talking about us being in that defense and then them flipping that big receiver out there and getting him matched up with a linebacker, McMillian, I think was his name. And the linebacker obviously couldn't cover him. So I think that right there indicates that there's some issues with schematics and getting people in the right places. But I don't place all the blame on the coaches because I think the only thing I would say negative there is that maybe they make it a little bit too complicated for having new guys coming in only a few months to learn it all. Maybe it's a little bit too complicated for them. I think just get it simplified vanilla. I think it'll be interesting this week. We do have a new defensive coordinator, what the changes are. Yeah.
No, and there's a lot to your comment there regarding complication of the defense or even complication of the offense. I mean, when you're sitting down and what a lot of people I don't think realize or know is that, I mean, this thing, well, and I'll say this, it used to come in a 3-ring binder, but now it's probably an iPad or, however they do things with that, but it's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's a lot of terminology, schemes, all that. And yes, when you just kind of walk in and you've got from August till September to figure it out, gel. I mean, it's a struggle. So that's a lot more on the coaches now, I think, in college football with trying to do that. I mean, it just and that was the thought. I mean, years ago it was you just didn't see a lot of, say, true freshmen playing either side of the ball in any position unless they were just really extremely gifted athletically. Because picking up the schemes, the terminology, the offense, the defense, it's a lot. And, time is the best teacher with things like that, repetition.
Yeah, I think if you've ever sat into an offensive play call, I mean, to a person like myself, who I feel like I know a little bit about it, listen to those play calls. It's like somebody explaining a geometry problem. If you saw my math scores in school, you understand what I mean by that. But you listen to that and you're like, world. So it's a lot, it's a lot to consume and having a month and a half to do it, or how talented you are, it's to absorb all that. And I really think that's been a problem for us. I really do. It just seems like there's been too many instances where coverages were broken down and people were just running free all over the place, especially in a 3rd and 7, you'd be somebody wide open 8 yards down the field. So something.
And here's the thing too, the other point to that is what we're talking about here, obviously the defense or the offense, no matter which way you look at it, but the defense, they've got to learn their defense, their schemes. And then what we seem to typically forget about is that every time now we play another team, where they're trying to learn their offense, their schemes, their habits, their tendencies, and that's a lot in itself. I mean, you'd sit down on Sunday afternoon, you're handed depth charts, you're all this information on all the players that are going to be across the ball from you, and then it's learning what they do, and that is a ton of information just in itself that goes in a couple of days that you're expected to have down pat. I mean, and there are some players out there. I mean, I can remember sitting around a lot of times with a guy by the name of Kevin Landahl, who was a defensive lineman for WVU, and he was a couple years older than me. I think he was a senior in '98. But Kevin would sit there, and we might be somewhere. Say we played on noon, and we're somewhere at 7 o'clock that evening, and Syracuse is playing Virginia Tech, and and Kevin's sitting there looking at the TV, calling out the offensive plays before they even happened. Because I mean, he was always that in tune to the other team. And to a comment you made earlier, so let the guys play. Don't overcomplicate it. From depending on the position you play, I mean, you really have to be able to kind of pin your ears back and just play the game. And but there is that. If you're still trying to understand and get your head wrapped around your own schemes and your own defense, what your coaches want and what you should be doing, along with during the season, every other team, every other week, you're expected to play the game, let that information go, and then you start on the next team. And I think there can be a lot of confusion that starts happening there with these players.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things, and that's why it's great you're here, Tanner, having played for the Mountaineers, played high school and college football, you see these things. You can see what we see, and you see more depth and breadth of what's going on there. And as you were talking, I was saying, yeah, I see what he's talking about. And it's, it was interesting. We were talking to Major Harris the other night, was on the show. And he said something that, when you think about it in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. But when you're seeing it in real time, you don't. And he made the point that, when he thought about what he did on the field, it just came so naturally to him. He just did it. It was just sort of in his DNA. But after he got hurt in the first quarter of the game against Notre Dame, he said, for the first time, I began thinking about what I'm doing and how, if I do it the wrong way, I may further injure myself. And he said, now that he looks back on it, that was not helpful, because that's not what got him to where he was, but it's a natural thing. And you're right. It takes, you get to the point where, you get to the point where it becomes natural to you. And I think that applies in all fields. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to the banking industry. That as you get more experience, and the things that I remember when I was, a professor and preparing lectures, what took me an hour to do for 30 minutes later became 10 minutes, because I knew exactly what I was doing. So your point is really spot on. It applies to football, but God, everything in life.
Yeah,
well,
and
injuries
basketball
do that to you.
Go ahead,
Injuries. I'm sorry, Greg. I just want to. Injuries is one of the things that will really do that to you, because,
Yes.
and thinking back personally, I mean, again, you just, and I've told kids that whether I've coached with them or just being around them, is that practice, and this is any sport. Practice is just that. It's for the rep. It's for the feel. That's when you do your thinking. When you get into the game, it's reaction. It's you're not thinking. You shouldn't think. You should just be. You've worked so hard. You've practiced so much that it is now just what you are going to, mentally do, physically do. And I know I'm going to miss his name here, but there was a gentleman coached for Boston College. He was the defensive coordinator, I believe, when I was in school, and then he ended up taking the head job probably in 01 or 02. And I remember they were interviewing him and talking about the game when WVU opened up with Boston College one year. And he said, he always told his players, he's like, when you think, you stink. So they were the big hype was around Coach Rodriguez's offense with WVU, and they were just going to be going a mile a minute. And oh my gosh, what are you going to do about it? And he just was basically saying that we're going to practice, we're going to plan for it, and then we're going to play the game. And you're going to go out and you're just going to play. You're going to go. And that's when you do have an injury. And I've been in this boat too. All of a sudden you are thinking about whether, and I used to I wouldn't think about how not to get hurt further. I would think about how not to screw up my job because of the injury. So I might have to overcompensate somewhere else. And then real quick, because I know we're here all Mountaineer football, which I love, and I appreciate you guys having me on. But you mentioned high school football, and I would be ashamed of myself if I didn't just quickly mention that Princeton High School, Princeton, West Virginia, made history last night, won their 10th game of the season. So they are
dramatic fashion.
Very dramatic fashion. And that is the first time that they have hit the 10-0 mark since, I believe, 1943. So just a big shout out to those guys and the coaching staff, the players in Princeton.
And Tanner, I'll tell you something. I called Gate Road High School a lot of weeks, and I got to call the Princeton Oak Hill game. I'm gonna tell you what, they are for real.
That was a good one.
Yeah, well, and Oak Hill's only lost one game, and that was to Princeton, and so they got a good ball team. Also, Ed Spadero is kind of related to me. My wife.
Oh, no kidding.
Uncle. Yeah, it's my wife's uncle. Yep. In fact, his brother Gene helped me coach basketball at Mount Hope High School back in the day. It's been a few years back. So,
that is.
Back to our point.
The man.
Yep, we were talking about. What were we talking about? We're talking about people learning and not having to think and that sort of thing. And I coached basketball for 28 years. I was a head coach for 14 years. Best team I ever had was last year I coached in 2012. And those guys had been with me for 4 years. I had 5 seniors that started. And they would go out and we would run things and they would ad lib off of them. I didn't have to tell them anything. By that point in time, they just went out and played. And I had a lot of people tell me that scrimmage against them and that sort of thing, man, there were screens coming from everywhere. We didn't know what to do. And I said, it's just from doing it for 4 years and understanding the concepts and just doing it without having to think, what do we do on this? They just go do it and they ad lib off of it. And they're really, really, really good because of that. So that experience is a good experience.
Great.
Yeah. One of the things that we've got to watch out this afternoon, let me pull up his name, that it's not a name that has popped up much in the stats because he's not. You focus on Cincinnati, you focus on Corey Kiner as a runner, but you've got another. I hope we don't hear him much today. Evan Pryor. Let me see if he transferred in.
He is. He was a transfer.
Yeah, he came in from Ohio State, which tells you a lot. And this guy's averaging 9.2 yards a carry with a high, I think, of a 70-yard touchdown. He's only carried 36 times, scored 5 touchdowns. This guy, talk about efficiency. He's Mr. Efficiency. If he gets the ball, he does well. I mean, if you think about that, 330 yards on 36 carries with 5 touchdowns is incredible. And so he's, even though Kiner has, let me see, how many rushes does he have? He has 123. So he has 100, literally almost 100 more than what Pryor has. But Pryor can kill you with his speed outside, and we just can't let him. Yeah, and I think this is you just can't let that unexpected. I think Shannon put it well. Give them nothing cheap or free. That's stop the run. Give them nothing free.
Well, and look, it's college football, and one thing that I think it takes a lot of players time to understand is that you have to have depth. To be really successful, you have to have depth, and not in a next man up mentality, as if somebody gets hurt, who's going to step up. It's that, you need to be able to rotate maybe 2 to 3 running backs that really give you an impact when they're in there. Now you're going to have your workhorse that starts out and takes, say, 60-65% of the plays, but you need to have that second and third running back option that comes in, gives you fresh legs, and a lot of production yards. I mean, if you're talking about 9 yards a clip as an average, I mean, I don't want to see him in the game at all. But the big trick for West Virginia today, especially, and I think we've been in this position multiple times, but yeah, you don't want to turn that kind of unheard or unknown into a household name or a draft pick in one game. So they've got to be on their toes with this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And one of the things we haven't talked about, actually, two of the things, is this stadium, Nippert. I went back and looked, Tanner, and then tell me if I'm wrong. You didn't play Cincinnati during your years in Morgantown, correct? There was a big gap most of the 90s up until the early 2000s for some reason, because this series goes back to 1921, where WVU and Cincinnati didn't play. But Nippert Stadium has been around since, I think, 1901 in various stages of presentation. It's now bigger than it's been before, about 40,000. But it's more like old Mountaineer Field in the sense that the fans are right on top of you. And so you just don't want to get the fans into the game. So this needs to be more like an Oklahoma State. The other thing about that a lot of people haven't talked about is that when I was putting together that pregame video, I realized that on the schedule, it basically said on the date, it said November 7th, November 8th, November 9th. And the reason was at some point, the networks talked about telecasting this as a Thursday night game. And if not a Thursday night game, making it a Big 12 Friday night game. And then they decided to do neither and then have it as a Saturday game. And the reason is both teams had their second bye week last week. So they weren't playing on Saturday the week before. And so it very easily could have been a Thursday night game. And then eventually they decided to make it a noon kickoff on Saturday. Maybe better, because I'm not sure you'd want to go over and play Cincinnati on a night game on Thursday. Just fans they'd be more fueled.
Sure, yeah, that's exactly what you would hope for from a home crowd. On a Thursday night. I mean, if you are the home team, you want them riled up and ready to go and whatnot. The Thursday night games are tough. They're fun. I mean, honestly, they're a lot of fun. Played in a couple of them, but it's a lot easier to manage those games coming off of a bye week, which they would have been in, as opposed to, and I believe those who are in control of the scheduling now, they take a little bit more, they pay a little bit more attention to when someone's playing before the Thursday night games, because we used to saw a lot of times that when in the early years of the Thursday night game, it really didn't matter. You'd play on Saturday and you'd have to come right back in, and Saturday morning or Sunday morning, you're getting ready for a game on Thursday and you're down a couple of days. So, but I did notice that it's kind of funny as I turned my calendar in my office to this weekend. I had initially written that in as a Thursday. I had Cincinnati on Thursday and just an arrow through Saturday. So that's one of those. And I'm sure that their record at this point plays a little bit into it. If you're looking at two teams that might have had one loss each, or one that, one loss, one of two, it might have been a little bit more of a draw to some of those to think that, hey, we'll do this on a Thursday, Friday night. It'll get a lot of attention, but they're going to be ready in Cincinnati. I've always heard. I've never even been to a game there, but when the Big East lost a few teams in the early 2000s and picked up, and of course Cincinnati was one of the teams that jumped into the newer Big East. From what I heard from friends of mine that went to the games, they're always a great place to go. Great atmosphere, good folks, and so I think it'll be a heck of a crowd and a great game.
Yeah, I think one other thing too, Thursday night, if you remember, the Cincinnati Bengals were playing the Ravens, big NFL game. I'm sure too, because Cincinnati playing that with a drawn love their crowd, I'm sure. And they didn't want to compete with that, I'm sure. But yeah, you're right. And shift them around like that based on the record and importance and all that sort of thing. Now, I'll say this about Nippert Stadium. I remember going there back probably. We used to go to about all the games when I was younger, and we went to Nippert Stadium. One of the things we were amazed by was the fact that they sold beer in their concession stand. Yeah, we thought we died and went to heaven. Very few college programs did that back then. West Virginia surely didn't. And yeah, we thought we died and went to heaven. We thought that was the greatest atmosphere, but it was a great atmosphere, even though their team was not very good. The crowd was good. The people were nice. It was a good experience. Yeah, good experience.
Yeah. And, Tanner, your point about this team, and Greg too, they're 5-3, but they lost 2 games by 4 points total. Pitt did to Cincinnati what Pitt did to us. They came back at the last. I looked at this the other day in the fourth quarter, and another blitzkrieg on Cincinnati, and won a game when they were really significantly behind. Pitt is, and then they lost to Texas Tech by 3 at Texas Tech. So they could be 7-1. They were in the game against Colorado until the very end. They beat UCF. And so this team could be 7-1. And, one of the things we talked about last year is that we felt, even though Cincinnati was in the mix for the college football playoff a couple years ago under Luke Fickell before he left for Wisconsin, they got Scott Satterfield from Louisville, who's an accomplished coach. But we felt, and we ended up to be right, Satterfield going to Cincinnati first year, Cincinnati going from a group of 5 status with an upgrade to the Big 12, it was probably going to be a learning experience. And it was. And they didn't do very well. I mean, last year at this time, we remember that Cincinnati game against West Virginia, and we just, that wasn't even a game. They came back at the end, and the score was closer, but the game wasn't as close as that final score. But this is a different Cincinnati team. He's had a year under his belt with his staff. They're recruiting well, and they're formidable. And we just have to show up today, because one of the issues that people have brought up in the chat here, we brought it up, is that you've got to play all 4 quarters, and you got to play like the Oklahoma State game when the foot was always on the pedal.
Agree. And that was honestly probably the Oklahoma State game was, in my opinion, the only game that we played this year where it was 4 quarters of hard-nosed football. I mean, Kansas, I'll take that back. Kansas was a game that they played tough in for 4 quarters, in my opinion. But they do have to throw everything out there on the field, and it has to be from start to finish. There can be no easing up. And, one thing about the team, Cincinnati's team from last year to this year, in very much in TCU fashion with Coach Dykes, when you look here at the offense, 9 of the 11 in the starting depth chart here are transfers. And then you have 5 of the 11 on defense. So, it's one of those where, first year in the Big 12 and things not going that great, but having a team put together like this with a lot of experience, and that's not even talking about like with Evan Pryor and some of the players that are going to be in that second loop on the depth chart. I mean, there's a lot of experience, a lot of transfers in here, and sometimes I'll sit there and say, and Greg, you mentioned as well, where, it does take time to gel and this and that, but sometimes you have a little bit of lightning in a bottle kind of hit, and you have that experience merge in, and everybody gets on the same page relatively quickly. And yeah, you're right, Frank. This is a 5-3 team that could easily be 7-1.
Yeah, and everything holds true. You're talking about those people gelling and all that. That's why I feel certain that had we, I don't know if it's even a word, but vanillized it, a little bit more vanilla from the get-go, that we might have been a little bit more successful, especially in our secondary. Because at times, as far as stopping the run goes, we've been very good at that. But in the past, it's what's who's getting us. And again, I still feel like that is, schematics, being in the wrong place, not knowing who you're supposed to cover, that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think you can bring transfers in, but and I don't know what Cincinnati has done, obviously, but it's worked for them. But I think you have to. I don't know that you can get into these deep involved schemes, and I don't even know if that's what's happened. It just looks that way to me. And I'm not a football coach, and I don't know all the schemes and that sort of thing, but it just looked to me like that we were lost so many times. And the idea of the dumb jock has gone by the wayside because the stuff they have to remember and all that sort of thing. With one exception, and I think it's Lynn Murray. I don't know, Ken, if you know Lynn or not, but I worked with Lynn Murray. He was a safety at WVU for years, and I'm hoping he's watching this because he does. The stereotype dumb jock does fit him very well, but for most of them, it does not. And they got to know this stuff, and it's a lot of things to remember. And you can rely on talent, but again, if you're not in the right place, the right time, talent's not going to help you a whole lot there.
No, I agree. And we used to joke a lot. And again, depending on, with who's listening and if they played and where they played, but we used to joke a lot that, and I still do, I like to give them grief that the offensive side of the ball was the smart side of the ball. We had to do a lot more learning, retaining, scheming, knowing what everybody else is doing. And we kind of felt like the defensive line, especially, all they had to do was, again, just dig in and take off running and try to run over something. But it's not that way. It probably never really was, and it's certainly not that way now because, again, and I like to watch, even I was at a high school game. We were watching Wheeling Park last night, who's also had a great season here locally. And I'm looking down at the sidelines while plays are being called in, and this is offensively and defensively. And I know that some of the coaches or players, depending on how you do it, are they're decoy signals. They're over there. I mean, we did that when I was in school, where you had you'd have our offensive coordinator, and then you'd have I remember. You'd have your backup quarterback and your next quarterback in line over there, all given the same signals. But however, one of them was who the quarterback's watching. But it's a lot now. And I sit and I watch, and I'm just looking, and I'm looking at the kids they're looking back, catching all these signals. And there's a lot that they don't do the whole running players in and out to bring a play in or anything like that. And it's just, there's a whole lot. And again, I feel like it keeps coming back to the experience, the rep, and the time. I think time and repetition are the best teachers with this kind of scenario. But
yeah. I want to bring up Andrew's comment from earlier. We all agree secondary obviously needs to step up. Good point. I believe the offense with Nico. We haven't talked about Nico, and here's a key to the game that I think. We at least put it this way, people should be looking for. I will be too. And I was shocked when I saw this. The NCAA keeps really good statistics on the 133 major college football teams. Cincinnati on defense, total defense ranks 102nd. They are giving up a whopping 405 yards a game and 6.21 yards per play. So one of the keys, again, going back to Nico, we have to mimic that, if not do better. 400 yards would be great, but the point is, over 8 games now, 2/3 of the season, that's a weakness. That's a weakness for Cincinnati that absolutely has to be exploited. You can't have a championship team that gives up 6 yards a play and the other teams average 420. And remember that average includes teams like Towson State they played earlier, and Houston when Houston was really struggling. And it's still, that's a big number.
Well, it is. And offensively speaking, and I know this was mentioned earlier, and how we can keep their offense off the field is naturally by trying to control the clock. grinding it out. I think, Greg, you mentioned, I mean, we really need to hammer the ball. Running that, I mean, when you look at our offensive line, seniors, juniors, all the way across, we really don't get into sophomores and freshmen until you're looking at our second loop with the players. But 400 yards, if that's the average, that absolutely has to be taken advantage of. And again, ideally, what I would love to see, what I think everybody would love to see, is that, yes, you run the ball 5-6 yards a clip, maybe break out some nice runs and really take advantage, eat the clock, keep their offense off the field. But at the same time, and if Nico is going to throw the ball all over the place, run a little bit, I'll happily take 7 points off of 2 plays as well. We're not going to give away anything, but I'm pretty excited here. I remember watching Nico was on ESPN as a senior. There was a game he was playing, and I mean, they were down by, it was ridiculous. It was 3 touchdowns. There was hardly any time left, and he led that team coming back, a couple onside kicks, and they ended up winning the game. And I honestly have been excited about him being a Mountaineer ever since. I'm thrilled that he came. I'm even really more impressed that he stayed, because he and Green both, I think, have kind of bided their time. They've waited. They've not played the game as much, and I'm thrilled that they're both on this team. But we have an opportunity not only to really run the ball and have the ball in White's hands, Donaldson's hands. I mean, these are 2 guys that prove themselves week in and week out as just fantastic running backs. But if Nico steps up and makes himself a household name today, that would be ideal for us as well.
Yeah. Got some good comments here, guys, that Joey Foster brings up, and that is Greg, we don't have a backup. That is sort of the X factor here, that if Nico goes down, what do you do? I don't know if Garrett Green made this trip. I think you guys may know this, but they bust over to Cincinnati, but they're going to fly back. And so did Garrett Green, is he able to play? Is he there? And is he able to play if Nico goes down? And then, Justin Johnson raises a question here. Is this the fork in the road for Neil Brown if West Virginia loses? This would be really tough on him if he uses. And the other thing is that Joey brought up a stat which I did not know, but it makes sense. And we've been burned by quarterbacks who really have trouble under pressure, but don't when they have time. And it looks like Sorsby is another one of those guys.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere this morning that Green did make the trip and would be available in an emergency situation, which I would guess that mean he's limited to the ball. He'd just be able to throw. And I heard him talk about the backup, and I can't remember his name. He's a highly touted freshman, but he is a freshman. Hasn't played any. They think he's going to be really, really good, but he's not really, really good right now, so that's going to take a while. And I think we're going to have to come out. I think we'll see this. We'll try to establish the run game early, and I hope, like I've said every week, that we use the short, intermediate passing game, and try to open up that run just a little bit, because they are susceptible to the run. That's supposed to be one of our strengths. So I think we've got to come out and try to establish that. And if we can, I think we'll be in good shape, because again, we can possess the ball for longer points of time, keep their offense off the field. But I am like Tanner. I'll take a 2-play touchdown anytime.
Well, and when we, Frank, that now that you mentioned that, I mean, and obviously, so if Garrett's available in an emergency situation, if it's Wilkins, that would be that next option. I mean, I agree. He's a freshman. You have a couple of guys on the roster here, but that's not where you want to see it. But knowing that there's not really a second option, and certainly not a third option. I would imagine, my guess is going to be they're going to want Nico to throw first and run as an absolute last resort. I hate to see or to think that option is taken away from him, because I don't think he's the same runner that Garrett Green is, but he's good on his feet. He is a good dual threat, and unfortunately, from the game preparation side of this, Cincinnati knows that too. So they're looking at the same depth chart that we would be looking at, and they know, what, I bet if we can, and whether that's adding a defensive back to the coverage, trying to have West Virginia in a third and long situation, they're gonna put this and dare West Virginia and Nico to get the job done. I mean, they're going to dare him, and knowing that we don't have a lot of options, they are telling Nico, hey man, let's try to find a first, second, third, last resort option, throw it up in the stands. I mean, that kind of thing. Just don't get hurt. But he does. And real quick, and this goes back to the ultimate fact of football at any level, is that the 5 guys up front and the tight end, if they're hanging out, they have to protect it. We have to have some good blocking if we're going to keep a running back in. They have to step up. And I'll say this: our running backs, in my opinion, have done a fantastic job when they're back in there and they're pass blocking. I think they've done a great job. So, but no quarterback throws well running for his life. There's some things in there where they're meant to roll out. They're going to have some movement. I'm all for that, but running for their life is a different situation, and none of them throw well on their back. So we have to protect. We've got to do our job.
Yep. And I want to mention, I didn't mean to be disparaging to the young guy, the quarterback. I didn't mean that he's not good. He's got a lot of talent, I understand. Just hadn't had the experience, Chad, and step into a game. So that would be tough on him. But yeah, we've got to do a job up front. We've got a pass block. We've got a run block. Been saying that. And I think our offensive line have come around a pretty good bit in the last few weeks. We've protected pretty well. And, I think they've taken a step up. So they're doing a little bit better. I just still think it all hinges on that defensive secondary. Make sure we cover up people. And it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah,
I think it does. And
look at
Frank. I wanted to follow up on one other thing you mentioned, just with Coach Brown, who I will always say Coach Brown was a great. He's been great for West Virginia. I think. I think when he came on board and the situation of when he was hired, going through COVID and all that. I mean, he has been what the Mountaineers needed when he was there. But I do think they are in a position right now where if you were to take the season right now, just the games that we've played, and you look at it and we do have some wins, but our losses have, outside of the Pitt loss, we may really not have been in the game. And these are good teams, and we just weren't there. So I don't think it looks favorable for him right now as you see it. Now we've got 4 games left. We have 4 games against, albeit I think we all agree here, Cincinnati's a very good team. 5-3 is not a great reflection of the team, I don't think. But we do have 4 unranked teams on here. So my opinion, for the Mountaineers, for the coach, for the coaching, for everybody that's involved, these are 4 just red letter games. I mean, you have to win these games. And I think that a loss to any of these remaining teams really puts the pressure on Coach Brown. I think it puts the pressure on our athletic director, because again, you look back and you're winning some of the games you should win, but we were not getting over the hump with some of the games that put your program back on a national level of respect. So now we win the next 4 games, and we're sitting there and we're we're 8-4, and you end up in a bowl game and potentially win a bowl game. You're 9-4. Now there's even more pressure, I think, on Ren Baker, because now you're looking at a 9-win team. But again, you look at the quality of the wins and the quality of the losses. So I would just say, honestly, it's that question is going to become, it's going to be before every game. If we do not come out with a victory today, it's going to be, it's going to really start getting hot under Coach Brown, unfortunately. It's
I think
we'll see.
Maybe if the defense shows improvement in the secondary with the new coach and that sort of thing, and we are very competitive and maybe lose right at the end, maybe not as bad, but I think a loss here definitely turns up the heat and makes those last 3 games even that much more important, because I think you could even possibly live with 7-5 bowl games, 8-5 possibility. But I think a loss here really puts some pressure on, and that just makes each game after that even more pressure back. But we just hope that there's a vast improvement in our defense secondary, and like Shannon said, just a correct defender covering them with a good start. Am I asking too much? You're not asking too much.
You're not.
That's what we all been asking for. So I think if they show some improvement there, it might help.
Yeah, if you look at it from this way, given what you said, Tanner. So, and I don't think anybody would disagree with you who's reasonable at all, that those games where we didn't play as well as we should, what are we looking for? Well, Shannon's got one of them, and that is that we've got to have, at the very least, much more disciplined structure and effectiveness in the defensive backfield. That's one thing. The other thing is, I looked up when you were talking earlier, is to make sure that, as we did at Oklahoma State, that we exercise our strength, particularly when there's a weakness. And I looked up where Cincinnati is in terms of their defensive rushing statistics. And again, it's really shocking. They're giving up over 5 yards a game, and total rushing defense, they're giving up 165 yards a game. Now, if West Virginia, when you think about our strength with those 2 running backs and with Nico, 165 yards in rushing offense is not extraordinary. And so we're just getting to the point where that's average for Cincinnati. So there's clearly, we have to improve a weakness, and we have to exercise, really impose an offensive strength. And I think that those 2 things combined are needed to be able to get from we're losing games we shouldn't necessarily lose to we're winning games that we need to win.
And if you're talking about 165 yards, while that's something that, again, we would love to see, but in my opinion, and probably everybody here and everybody listening, when you're looking at a veteran offensive line like we have, and the 2 running backs that we showcase, we should have 165 yards and then some. And not to mention also, Frank, when we take advantage of that weakness with our strength, and we're going to run the ball that much, and if we can rattle off 5-6 yards a clip, talk about the pressure we're taking off of Nico mentally now. And it's just going to open up that passing game, because at some point Cincinnati's going to have to start really loading the box, and we're going to find our receivers. They're going to win the battles out there, and they're going to be open. So yeah, I agree 100%. We need to take advantage of that. Open up the running game. If we can dominate there and push up front, then we can open up the passing game and really be effective across all of our players.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I just put the link. My mistake for not putting in earlier. For those who'd like to come in and say a few words right in the studio, we're getting close to the end of the hour. I just put that. In the chat, so you just have to click that and you can come in. And if you start swearing, we'll just swear back. That's the way we do things.
Well, that's like I always said, about Mountaineer fans, with the players and whatnot. I mean, you never wanted to to take it. I mean, you listen. If you're going to play a sport at West Virginia, you're going to have somewhat of a thick skin.
That's right.
But Mountaineer fans, they'll cuss at you, they'll yell at you, but it's more of from a sibling type scenario, because you know what, nobody else is allowed to, and they're going to be the first one standing behind you and coming over your shoulder when it's somebody from an opposing team that's deciding they're going to step in.
That's what we used to always say, that they may be assholes, but there are assholes. Leave them alone.
Right. Yeah, that's right. No, there's
right.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No, that's with West Virginia, with the Mountaineers especially, and of course, I mean, near and dear to my heart. But I mean, we don't have any pro teams in this state, and so when it comes down to football, I mean, there's the Mountaineers, there's Marshall down in the southern, more southwestern part of the state, and then we've got some smaller college football going on, but we're it. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of love for the Mountaineers, but when the fans are ready to let you know how they feel, they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. No question about that.
I think the keyboard era makes it a little bit more prominent as well. A lot easier to get behind the keyboard and say things than it is for somebody else.
Oh my gosh, and that's the truth.
We see plenty of that for sure.
Well, and one thing, and just going back real quick, and I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but when you're looking at the coaching situation, and I think Ren Baker has done a really nice job since coming to Morgantown with how he's handled a couple of situations with the other sports, how he's handled the situation with Neil Brown. I think he's done a very good job, and I know another part of his job is, he always has to have his finger on the pulse of the coaching world in a lot of sports, because you're typically in one of two situations. I mean, you're going through some rough seasons and you might be looking for a new coach, or you're going through some great seasons and you might be looking for a new coach. So I know that he is, behind the scenes, I'm sure he is, there's a lot of things going through my mind, or his mind, on that. And, but a lot of times too, maybe a coaching change is something that an athletic director feels is necessary, but there might not always be the great option out there that puts you in a better place for your team, your kids. So, that's always something for the fans to think about too, is, we always want to talk about a replacement, but, sometimes we need to take a good hard look at what we have.
Yeah, and I think people are mad about looking at the hottest name around, and Nick Saban's got West Virginia ties. He should be coming next, and I'm sure Nick Saban's sitting there thinking, man, I can't wait to go to Morgantown and coach WVU. Same way with Jimbo Fisher. I just don't. First of all, I don't know if those are the answers. I think the game is changing so much and so fast that you need, an intellect. Not that those guys aren't, but Neil Brown seems to be getting a better and better grasp on things as the years are going on. He's figuring out the portal, the NIL things, and all that, and that's going to be the key. It's not going to be X's and O's, I don't think. And I think we need to think about that as well.
I agree 100%, because that's just one of those things. And Coach Saban specifically, that's what you don't want to deal with. That's not the football that you're used to. And it's even hard to work on the mental toughness of these kids. And I had just a very brief conversation with Coach Mike Joseph at WVU, who's their head strength coach. It's, how do you push these kids? They used to push us to the limit, and then they'd shove us 15 yards past it. And now these kids, they look at you and like, well, I don't like how you're talking to me. I'm not playing enough anyway, so I'm gonna take a look somewhere else. And I think that's tough on the coaches. And I think you almost start to think that some of the better college coaches moving forward are either going to be former college players that have lived through the NIL, and when they start paying players and they start doing all this and the transfer portals, or Or you look at some of these professional coaches who, they're dealing with free agency and salary caps and all this. I mean, when you're thinking about names, I mean, there should be this big blinking light behind Anthony Beck. Tony, obviously a phenomenal, Hall of Fame this season at WVU. He's a Hall of Fame player.
That's right.
Played in the NFL, first round draft pick, and he's coached the St. Louis Battlehawks to 2 incredibly successful seasons, the past 2 years. So, to me, it's got to be a guy like that, a guy who knows how to coach, who knows how to run a team, but it's all becoming that level now. The amateurism is gone. And guess what? It's not coming back. That's not a genie you put back in the bottle. So that's gone. So the coaching style and mentality across the board is going to have to be different. And guys like Ren Baker, men and women who are athletic directors, they're going to have to start looking to these professional coaches, and that's women's basketball, football, men's basketball, baseball, all over, because it's not football's not in a vacuum. It's every sport at every college.
That's right.
So that's in my opinion, that's where you have to start looking. And of course, I think Tony would be an amazing asset and a great coach.
Oh, what a great guy, Joey. We're after an hour, so we're getting close. Are you there? Your picture's there.
I'm here, Frank. Hi, Frank. Hi, Greg. Hey, Tanner. How you doing, buddy?
Good, sir.
I wanted to just come in. I like what Tanner was saying there about Anthony Beck. That would be a great option for a coach. But I also like, after last night's news about Jordan Leslie. I hate that for Leslie. I hate that for his family. I hate that something like that happened. I guess pressure gets to you after a while. I don't know what happened there, but when we're looking at coaches and stuff, the three of you think that we made the correct choice in firing Jordan Leslie and moving forward in the bye week like we have? And will it make a difference? I don't see where it's going to make a difference, because our secondary was the problem. And and mind you, we had some slip ups with play calls on defense. I admit that he did some bad play calls on defense, but at the same time, our secondary was our problem. I felt like that's where the biggest change needed to be made, and just our coaching overall, just at the head coaching level. I felt like there was. I think Neil Brown's one of the better coaches in the country, Sunday through Friday. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country. I think he has a lot of trouble coaching a game on Saturday. I don't know what it is. I never felt like that about him when he came. I didn't feel like it about him after year 1 even. But year 2, 3, 4, and 5, it's just been like coaching blunders, in my opinion. And like I said in my key points for the game today, we have to get pressure on the quarterback today. We have to. If we don't, he will pick us apart. He's a very good quarterback. He will pick us apart if we do not get some pressure on him. And that's where I felt like Jordan Leslie was our strength. We were getting some good tackles for losses. We were getting some decent pressure. Mind you, it could have been better at times, but our secondary has been our problem. So I'm kind of wondering if we've made a positive change, a good change for the program right now, mid-season like that.
Joe, you make a really good point. Because it's one of those. Unfortunately, it falls on the defensive coordinator, right? He's not your secondary coach. He's not your linebacker coach, but he's responsible for everybody. And so I think when, especially in college football today, that's where people want to go to make that first change. Is it makes an impact, right? Even when you read across the headline, defensive coordinator has been let go. It just hits a little bit different than secondary coach has been let go or replaced. And not saying that that's right, but I think sometimes that's what coaches and administrations get forced into. And it also is an indication that wants to come across that Neal Brown is addressing the situation. You know, he hears, he knows that he's not asleep at the wheel. He knows that he doesn't need to hear from us or the fans screaming from the stands that the secondary has had some issues. He knows. So that's also him saying, you know what, this might be our best way to fix it, is to put somebody else in control over the overall umbrella. Because we can't. While you make a change there, you want to see it better the secondary, but you don't want to lose, as you mentioned, the focus on how the pressure's been getting better, the tackles for loss. You know, the linebackers do a nice job because the linebackers are young. So that's all coming along. You don't want to lose that momentum. So that in that sense, it's kind of a coin flip today.
Right. And I think, you know, and you think about it, none of this took place until the billboards went up in Morgantown. So Neal Brown felt the pressure when the billboards went up. Why didn't he feel the pressure before the season started? He should have felt the pressure before the season started, in my opinion, and made positive changes to the program at that point. And to me, it's just a little too late to come in and make it. Now, listen, if it's a positive change and things go better the rest of the season, by all means, I'm going to be excited, be happy for Neal Brown and things, because there's nothing worse than a head coaching change. That's for sure. You know, when you've got to go out for a coaching search and you've got to bring a new coach in, and you've got to, you know, it's expensive. Number one, it's expensive. You're not only changing the head coach, you're doing buyouts, and then you're just like rebranding pretty much all together. So it's expensive to even change a head coach. So I'm all for this if it works out. I just don't see where the progress is going to come from. There's not been any big coaching change. You know, Coon's coming in as the defensive coordinator now, so nothing's really changed. So I'm worried about that today. So let's see. I'm not gonna say that we don't have a chance in this game, because I think we can beat Cincinnati. I do believe that, but it's going to take some pressure that I felt like probably Jordan Leslie could get that pressure on them. And I'm going to see how that pressure works out today. But anyway, I will get out of here and let you guys finish your show out. I wanted to come in. Frank, you had put my key points of the game up earlier, and so I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you later. Let's go Mountaineers.
All right, Joey. And, you know, I agree somewhat there. I think Coach Miller was in, or Coach Brown was in a position where he had to do something. He's not blind, like Tanner said. You can see that the secondary struggling. You see the defense is giving up plays, play after play after play. So he had to do something. He's shaking it up a little bit. I have no issue with it whatsoever after watching our defense perform. And you know, it may help out. We tone things down a little bit, simplify them a little bit, and maybe it works in our favor. Maybe we see some vast improvements. So I'm okay with the change. I hope it works out. Frank, it kind of reminds me. I think I might have told you this. Fellow I knew took a new head football coaching job. The old guy that was leaving, handing him an envelope, and he said, "Now, when things get bad, open that envelope." Started off the season pretty good. Started tailing off a little bit. Opened that first envelope, said, "Blame the administration." So he comes out in the press conference, gives the administration hell, goes back next 3 or 4 games, pretty good, and they start tailing off again. I better open that next one. So he opens that next letter, and it says, "Blame the assistant coaches." So he comes out on the press conference, blames all the assistant coaches for their failures, goes back to work, start winning again the next couple of years, and start falling off again. He said, "I had time to open that letter." So he opens it up, and it said, "Prepare 3 letters." So I think you get to the point where you got to try to shake things up a little bit and see if it helps you. I mean, I credit him with having the courage to do that rather than criticizing him for doing it at this point. I don't think they knew in the season that they had these glaring gaps in their defense. I think teams exposed that, and I think they realized that, so we're going to do something different here. So I applaud him for making the effort. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the game show. Appreciate both of you. It's been a lot of fun. The hour and 10 minutes flew by, and we're looking forward to a Mountaineer victory today. So let's get it done. And Frank, I think you're going to put up the graphics for this post-game show. Tanner, we appreciate you stepping in and giving us some time. Great insight. It's nice to hear from players that know what's going on, rather than me and Frank can just guess what's going on. So,
well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It is a blast, and I don't know that I know what's going on. I just talk a good game, but this is great. I'm glad you guys do this, and it's fantastic, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
All right, Tanner, thank you.
Okay.
Frank, as always, a good job keeping everything together. And we look forward to seeing you after the game. Let's go Mountaineers. Also, we're going to watch U Pike Bears play basketball. So let's go. U Pike have 2 victories today.
There you go. Go Mountaineers.
Let's go.